I'm just I was literally like almost up to the top of the app gap, where you get, it's actually, you call right then, where you get a little brief, like, minute of service, and then you start going down, up at the top. It's funny when I drive, I get like all my notifications, like, beep, 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 and then back into the dead zone.
Sheet Mrs. Desk.
Sometimes you give teacher vibes, so I think that is appropriate.
Yeah.
They're like occasionally principal.
Oh, geez.
It depends on the moment, but they're both good. It's both good.
Not sure about that.
I think it's good. Some of our principals were good.
Sarah and Monica, can you hear us?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
Shelby's running online first, and then she's gonna be here. She's
Okay,
running online.
great. And then,
I love your video.
Which one was
Your
that?
dancing video.
Oh, thank you. It's how I'm getting out my angst at this time.
let's wait. Well, we don't have a quorum currently, but, yeah, we have us three here in the room so far.
Where's the rest of the crew?
I'm not sure, hopefully on their way. Probably, hopefully finding parking. It is new member orientation week this week, so, oh, we got some more folks.
Jubilee, who is in the room, just so that I know?
It's just, Brenda, myself, well, in terms of members of the task force, Brenda and myself.
I'm coming from Miranda.
Okay.
Oh, okay, Miranda's not coming, okay.
Miranda's not coming. So is Nicole, Nicole, are you attending on behalf of Miranda?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so we'll count you in the quorum.
Molly just walked in. I just spilled water all over myself.
I did have a lot
I
of.
did coffee in the car right here.
I wore a
I
sweatshirt.
wear
That's what I
a
do in the
sweatshirt.
car,
Me
is I
too.
always wear something over, because there's been so many times during the legislative session
I
where
remember you coming up and I spilled coffee.
That is me too.
That is
Me
so
too.
smart.
I always
way more than
wear a
I'm willing to
zip-up
admit.
ear in the car when I drive, always, because I am a mask. My first, I'll tell you a side story. My first campaign, my then campaign manager and now one of your legislators,
oh, Teddy,
yeah, he banned me from eating fruit that makes colors.
because I kept getting it all over myself.
Yeah, like strawberries.
Strawberries, even plums
Yeah,
have like a weird
totally.
color. Yeah, he was like, no more, you're banned. No more of it.
That is funny.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that we have a quorum. We need 7 for a quorum, and I think we do. Brenda, Jubilee, Nicole, Chris, Molly, Lily, and myself. That gives us a quorum, right?
Yeah.
Should we give it another minute to see if anyone else is coming in?
Let's do it, just because I am worried about folks finding parking. They're used to being able to park right up by the building, and those spots were, at least when I came in, a little before 9 today, they were all taken. So I'm afraid folks are having to find parking and walk, especially if they're not familiar with places they can park.
Okay.
When in the middle, I put Shelby here, just, you're fine.
Oh, okay.
Just so you know, she's gonna copy it, so she can read it. I can see.
Oh, okay, so she's gonna read something.
She's gonna be here.
And just to give folks a heads up, I am also having to sort through an issue with the Agency on Children and Families, because our HMIS data is not being read properly by the RIMUS repository. So I have to be doing some of that as well for our PPR, our annual PPRs.
All right, I think we should go ahead and get started here. Okay, I don't see Lily on the call anymore though.
Yeah, Nicole and Lily just left the room.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, wait then.
I printed out some copies of the packets in case you need
What?
copies of the packets.
Okay, and I have 2 extra of the, of course, I don't know if you'll be able to read it, but some of it.
Never can tell.
You can look at the columns. I don't know if you want to see this.
Oh,
This is
thank
just
you.
the results from our.
Oh, wonderful, yeah. It's great.
Still need.
While we're waiting, Monica requested that when we do the lunch, when we break for lunch, anyone who's online leave the meeting, and then we'll restart it after lunch so that the recording can be more easily downloaded, not being a full 6 hours. So I just wanted to flag that. Monica, do you want us to do the same during the couple of breaks that we have, or is just lunch good enough for you?
Thank you for asking. I think lunch is good enough because we had 3 to 4 hour meetings before and we can handle that. I'm just worried about the 6 hours, but if we can take the lunch break and close out this meeting on Teams, I think that will be enough.
Okay, all right,
Okay,
thank you.
I'll log the room out once we leave for lunch, and then I'll let you know if it's gonna automatically, you may need to invite the room again, we'll see. But I'll let you know if it doesn't show up as an option to rejoin once I leave the room.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, do we have Nicole and Lily back in the room yet?
We do.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and get started, everybody. Welcome this morning. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person today. I'm feeling super not well, and I didn't want to pass anything that I have to you all today. I know we have, looks like Chris is online. Uh, do you all feel like we need to do introductions of task force members?
I'd like to know who's online.
Okay.
Molly, are you requesting introductions?
I would like that, it would just be real quick.
Sure. Okay. So my name's Sarah Russell. I'm the Special Assistant to End Homelessness for the City of Burlington and one of the co-chairs of this task force. I will kick it next to Chris.
Yeah, Christopher Loris, one of the co-homeless coordinators for the City of Rutland and the Vermont League of Cities and Towns to the task force. And I apologize for not being present. I'm out in Oklahoma at the time, but I've got the bandwidth to stay here the entire time. But it'll be, I don't have the literal bandwidth to go camera on.
That makes sense, Chris. Thanks for joining us from Oklahoma.
Yeah, of course.
Jubilee, do you want to facilitate introductions around the table in the room?
Sure, yeah, I will start. I'm Jubilee McGill. I am the co-chair of this meeting, or of the task force, and I'm one of the members with lived experience, and also a state rep. I'll pass it over to Brenda on my right.
I'm Brenda Siegel. I am representing Vermont Center for Independent Living on the task force, and I'm also the executive director of End Homelessness Vermont.
Good morning, I'm Molly Dugan. I work at Cathedral Square and I'm representing the Long-Term Care Crisis Coalition.
Good morning, Elizabeth Gilman, Executive Director for the United Ways of Vermont, Vermont T11.
Lily Sojourner, Director of the Office of Economic Opportunity. I'm the designee for Commissioner Chris Winters with the Department for Children and Families.
I'm Nicole Tuzio, Economic Services Division of DCF, covering today from Miranda Gray.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. So today, as you know, we have a long day, a big day ahead of us here. We will be approving minutes, opening public forum, reviewing the prioritization survey results from a couple weeks ago. And then we will move into our more deliberative agenda. We have broken out the directives into 3 pieces for our discussion today to make them a little bit more manageable. And you should all have a draft. Again, it's not a draft report necessarily or final report at all. It's really just a summary of the recommendations that we've heard to date to give us a starting point for discussion today. So with that, we will go ahead and look for a motion to approve the minutes of the October 29th task force meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
That's Brenda.
Brenda motions, and did I hear Molly second?
Molly seconded.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any discussion or edits for the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes of the October 29 GA task force meeting, please say aye or raise your hand. Opposed? And abstentions? Nicole abstains, right?
Yes, sorry, I just didn't read that.
That's okay. You're like this big, so I thought it was you. Okay, so the motion passes. Next on our agenda, we're going to go ahead and open up a public forum. Is there anyone, let's start with online. Is there anyone online who would like to speak during public forum today? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the room.
None.
Okay. I want to flag that we did receive a comment for public forum today from the Community Action Agency's VCAP, and that is posted on the website for folks to review when you have a chance. So hearing that there is no one in the room or online for public forum, we'll go ahead and close our public forum. Next up is reviewing the results from the prioritization survey that we did. I think I can share my screen, right, Monica?
That's right.
Can everyone see that here? I think you can, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we had 9 folks respond to the survey. We had 1 person respond via email. There was a bounce back to their email. So there was 1 person who, one member who participated or who provided feedback on the survey, but is not included here. And I can go ahead and review the notes around that, and we'll work to incorporate that into this final survey report. So the first question asked the task force to prioritize the directives. The chart that you see here indicates the highest ranked directives. So looking here, we'll see the household eligibility and maximum days directive was ranked the highest. Next highest is the number and types of emergency shelter. This is the shelter assessment that we'll hopefully be hearing from Frank a little later today on. Next is adjustments to the adverse weather conditions here. And then down here is a mechanism to ensure that eligible households remain sheltered until they're able to enter permanent housing. Followed by those highest ranked priorities, we also have a process to enable participation. But I think this is by the department around and determining the role of AHS in shelter provision. And then the next highest is strategies to reduce reliance on hotels in the long run. While we're hoping to touch on all of the directives today for the most part, those highest priority directives are the ones that we're going to really prioritize for discussion today. Any questions around this? Okay, the next piece is recommendations on a final report. These are the responses that we received here. I think in summarizing, I thought this comment was important, that some of the directives overlap each other. So I'm hoping that we can incorporate this feedback into our discussion today. It sounds like, for the most part, folks are looking for a majority report. And if there's minority opposition, then those folks in minority opposition can draft a parallel report with their recommendations. We also heard that the heads of the committee should write the reports, or a few folks should take lead and set an outline to make sure that the report is sort of organized and cohesive to be presented to the legislature. I'll leave this up on the screen for just a minute so you all can have a chance to sort of review, and this will also be, we'll work on incorporating the additional feedback that we received. I can actually read that comment in just a minute to you all. But this will be posted on the website as well. I'm hearing a great deal of background noise from the room right now.
It's, they have a air purifier.
Also, I think we might, well, maybe just make it better.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Okay. I'm
Yeah,
gonna go
so-
ahead and read the last recommendation that was not included in the survey. The respondent said, I'm certainly uncomfortable that a draft report is being issued ahead of this discussion where we vote on many items. I worry that this can lead to conversation and that seems inappropriate. I suggest a draft report after the full day retreat that we can work on in collaboration with interested members, taking on drafting ideas in which they were in the majority. And then others have an opportunity to write minority reports where they were in the minority as well. It seems like that process should not take place before votes have been made and decisions have taken place. Any thoughts or feedback or reflections on the survey report here?
I have one thought, Brenda. And I would have, and it's fine, it's done, but just, I would have liked to rank them like 1, 2, and 3 because there's so many intersectional issues within the task force within there. And then that would have like told us the number 1 and 2 priorities overall. But that was my only, I was struggling when I was ranking them because I felt like they're so intersectional and some of them go together and I don't want one really without the other. And so there was a little bit of, that made it a little bit hard.
Other thoughts on the surveys? I think that's, good feedback, Brenda. We kind of struggled a little bit with how to structure the survey and ultimately decided to do each directive because that was how they were tasked to our group. But I definitely understand the intersectionality between many of them. And hopefully the document that was sent out last night, it, indicates where there is some crossover. And we can talk more about that today. Okay. I think that now we will, oh, was there somebody who had something to say that I missed? Okay.
Not in the.
Okay. Okay. I think now we'll move into our discussion around the document that was sent out. And for the purpose of this portion of our meeting, we will be focusing on household eligibility, maximum number of days, application notice and appeals process, and participant requirements, and then annual reporting requirements. We'll also be focusing on coordinated entry system with participation from the department, the current roles and responsibilities of DCF and OEO and ESD, looking at income contribution and potential conduct challenges. So with that, I think that will get us through to our break. So where would we like to start with that? I can pull up the document that was sent out, if that would be helpful to folks.
Yep. Yeah, it'd be good. Yep.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to share my screen here. Are you all seeing the document that was sent out?
Yeah, can you make it a little larger?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So looking at the eligibility criteria, we did take some votes during our meeting last time around. And then, so I guess I'm wondering if there's further conversation. Some of the areas where we didn't have agreement on was the 60 years of age or older opposed to 65. A child 19 or younger, the youth exiting foster care, and we wanted to pause on the disability. So I'd love to open discussion around those items. I'll go ahead and highlight them on the screen.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
I thought that we voted on all of those things. The only one that we didn't was the domestic violence one. And we didn't have we didn't have unanimous, but I do think we voted.
It was
Well,
more like a straw poll. Yeah, that's what we were trying to hope shape it, because a lot of folks were feeling they couldn't commit until they had a full, bigger picture of our recommendations. Okay.
Not sure why I can't. What's going on here? Brenda, you asked for purple highlight, I think, last time.
So I'm sorry, what are we looking for? Are you looking for just,
These were the items that we did not, that we took a straw poll last time. These were the areas that are highlighted are the eligibility criteria that we either decided to defer a vote until we had more information, or that we had a majority that opted to abstain until we had the full eligibility criteria.
So what are you
looking
looking
for us to do right now?
I think my understanding was it was just the disability one. I thought the last one we did the other ones.
I'm just looking at our minutes.
Yeah.
It looks like that was voted on,
Okay.
the disability one.
Okay.
I thought it was just the domestic violence.
Or the DV one.
Yeah.
And we do have a definition.
Yeah.
For
So are we comfortable voting on all of these as a group and moving on?
I noticed in the comments for today that there was comments around the domestic violence, and so I'm not sure whether there was, maybe it was to make it broader, the definition, but I think we should make sure we're talking about that.
Yeah, that was one we had been waiting for language from the network on, which we just received. So Sarah, do you want to talk about that one? And then.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jubilee, but I think that was related to people who experience domestic violence once they're already in the program. It wasn't related to the eligibility criteria.
Okay. But I think that yeah, it is related to eligibility criteria, because it's whether or not someone can be considered under the DV category when they've experienced domestic violence in the hotel. And so that is an eligibility criteria. And right now, because of the way the law is written, that has not happened. So that's where that was.
Can you give me an example of, I would have assumed that if someone experienced DV in the hotel, that it would qualify. So can you give me an example of where it doesn't qualify?
Yeah, we have it happened on 3 different occasions that we had clients who experienced DV while in the hotels since July. And they were not considered in the DV category, even though they did go to domestic violence agency. And it was sent up to management, and management said that they were not considered because they didn't lose their housing based on that DV. Because they experienced it in the hotel. And in those 3 situations, the person who was eligible in the couple was the person who had perpetrated the domestic violence, and therefore the person who was a victim of domestic violence no longer qualified. And it might be a glitch, but I just think it should be clear in the rules so that it can be clear.
Does it make sense to replace this recommendation from the network with what we have written here under DV?
Or you mean replace what we have written here with what came from the network?
Replace what we have from
Just checking.
what we have. Yes, Jubilee. Sorry. I'm not on my game today, guys.
You're doing fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got it.
As long as all of the other things that were in the recommendation are
Yeah,
also in this.
Yeah, that kind of
Just
whole,
making sure.
the whole section.
Trafficking, stalking, all of that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for flagging that, Molly.
Yep.
Do folks feel ready to vote on this as a group, or do we need more discussion?
What are we voting on, Sarah? This is Lily. Just the
Eligibility
yellow?
criteria. No, the whole thing.
So the whole page 1, the whole page 1.
This eligibility criteria.
Okay, so
It's right
we
up
haven't
here.
talked about some of these items, and I'm not sure if folks want to talk about some of these items, but for instance, I think it's really challenging to have a discretion associated with eligibility. I think that makes it really difficult. So this paragraph around AHS Field Services will have some level of discretion in regard to eligibility that do not meet criteria, and then a funding pool shall exist for this purpose. So one, I think just programmatically discretion is hard for anyone who's like maintaining an eligibility program. Also, it sort of sounds like in this sentence, what's also being proposed is just more discretionary funding to field directors, which is like separate from GA eligibility. And so I'm not necessarily clear on that paragraph. And then I think, again, I just have a lot of questions, and I don't know if people are interested in hearing about sort of some of the like logistical barriers that could exist around that, or, you know, for instance, GA is a program within the Department for Children and Families. Field Services operates in the Agency of Human Services.
Oh, sorry. I guess I'll just jump in and say that AHS field service directors have typically had some level of discretion when there is a very specific situation, and under the new language in the law, they no longer have that. So that posed a challenge. What did you say, Lily?
I'm confused by, this is Nicole, I'm confused by your statement because, I mean, field services has had some discretion. They have housed some individuals in motels since September 19th outside of the GA program. So the two are very separate. So what discretion do you think they lost in the current version of the rules?
It was reported to me by our field services director that that there was no discretion that could be exercised once households met their 80 days.
Within GA, yes, but field services is different.
And field services never operated within GA prior either. So there, I think, are two separate things. And this paragraph, again, it makes it seem as if they have discretion within GA. And I'm unclear if that's what you're saying, or if you're just saying AHS Field Services needs to have more discretionary funding.
I see Chris's hand up too, so I want to make sure we don't skip over him. Go ahead, Chris.
The only thing I had to offer up is, this specific language as related specifically to the general assistance funds versus the, I'm probably going to show my ignorance here, that the broader AHS Field Service Director authority has right now. But I'm concerned that if we explicitly lay it out, it could possibly serve to further geographic disparity across the state, where for certain field services directors would find certain criteria appropriate for housing, and others may feel it's different. And just coming from a different world on the criminal justice side, a lot of discussion in the legislature the last couple of years about geographic disparities in the criminal justice system. And I would hate to see us inadvertently create something where we're making geographic disparities within field services and the general assistance programs as well. That's just spitballing. I haven't had a chance to think about it, but that was my. But just throw that out there for all of us to just think about.
Thanks, Chris. Am I hearing that folks want that removed, that people are not supportive of that statement in there?
Brenda has her hand up there.
Oh,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So a couple things. One is I feel like we're making a recommendation for a program, so it might be rather than the GA eligibility. So it may be look slightly different than the way it looks right now, and I think that would be a good thing from my personal perspective. But also, I think when we're making a program, that means that they may end up falling in different categories, the way that the legislature and the administration negotiate that later. And so that's something that I want to just say that just because it's happened one way in the past doesn't mean it can't happen. Secondly, I've also interacted with AHS field services coordinators who have told me that they have lost some of the discretion with the new law, and also district by district, there's already geographic equity right now issues in terms of how each AHS field service coordinator operates, and that is that deeply impacts the clients or the individuals across the state anyways. And I would like there to be discretion, but where I see the major problem is that the ability to really get a reasonable accommodation in terms of sheltering has been pretty much removed. And so if I was going to add a discretionary aspect, it would be with explicitly allowing reasonable accommodations. Because there's a whole 3-page document I don't have in my hand that says there cannot be reasonable accommodations for over the 80 days, which is not how I understand but the ADA, but it doesn't really matter. I think that so within that discretion area, I think making explicitly clear that reasonable accommodations are something that the department and agency and AHS field services coordinators both are able to use is really important. So that's all I would add to that. I thought we were just voting for now on the eligibility part, not the criteria. Not the whole section, but you're saying the whole section?
I thought we were just doing this top
Yeah.
first section above where
Yeah.
it says the task for recommend.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
because Sarah, you showed the whole like first page. when
Well,
you
she
showed-
said the criteria. Just
The
I know, but
criteria.
this is-
These are,
But that's what the subheading.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah,
under
yeah.
So
eligibility
it's all under
criteria.
criteria, so it's not.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, I
that-
highlighted on the screen while we were talking. Here, I can share my screen again. Okay, we can look at these right here.
Okay, that was my question, and I did not understand you correctly.
Okay. Any additional conversation, or do folks feel ready to vote on this?
This is Molly. I just have
has to be in the balance of state.
I just have a question on the last bullet, and just making sure it actually makes sense. So criteria should include a household that is a member of the family who is homeless as a result of hospital, rehab, or completion of substance use treatment facility stay. So are we saying they've gotten out of those stays and have nowhere to go? That's what we're saying?
Yes,
That last one.
yes, yep.
Is homeless as a result of
It's the homelessness as a result that's the problem. So that implies that you were housed, went into the hospital, lost your housing, came out without housing, versus you were homeless prior to your hospitalizational stay, went into the hospital, was discharged to the
Yeah.
street. Those are two different things. It's a good point.
Right, that's what
Yeah.
I'm confused by.
I agree.
I think we need something to clarify which of those.
Yeah, I don't think that it should be homeless as a result necessarily of hospital, because sometimes someone is homeless already and then they go, exactly like we just heard.
Maybe it's just, is homeless following
Yeah,
a hospital rehab, so then it doesn't matter.
or just has as a result, has been hospitalized and is homeless.
During the last meeting, according to the minutes, you voted to remove this one.
Oh, that's true, we did. Yeah, the minutes we already voted in eligibility. It's the only one that we need, that's what it says.
Okay,
Yeah.
then that takes care of that.
So. I think the only one we need to vote on is domestic violence, but I think we haven't heard, well, I guess we've added that one. So every other one has already been voted on. I think we need to vote on just domestic violence according to our minutes.
I have to take a pause on this meeting in about 3 minutes. So do we have, I think we'll still have a quorum with my absence, but is there proposed changes to this last bullet point?
Did we vote to remove it?
Yeah, we had already
We
voted to remove
voted
it.
to remove it.
So
Okay.
according to our last minutes, we voted on every eligibility criteria already, that's already been done, except the domestic violence one.
There
That's
were
the
a
only
few
one.
that, I mean, I don't have the minutes in front of me, but I know that there were a few that we didn't have majority on. And so those are the ones that I've highlighted in purple here. I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
No,
looking
yeah,
back,
I'm
but
It was-
I guess,
No.
I think that what we decided was to vote on all of these as a group. That's what I have in my notes, that we talked about voting all, individually, and that's what we did at the last meeting. And then our intention was to vote on them all as a group at this meeting. Go ahead.
I mean, it says that in our minutes, it says that, I somehow lost the beginning of this, but it says, vote on eligibility criteria language as it is recommended. And that says 1, and then it says everyone that voted yay or nay. And we have a majority minority on everything except domestic violence.
Okay. So is there a concern about voting on all of these as one group, or are you proposing to vote on just the domestic violence piece?
I think that because there are people, members who aren't here who already voted on the criteria, and there's already a majority minority, that it would not be appropriate to then re-vote when we already have voted on these.
Jubilee, how would you like to proceed?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding was we were just going to be voting, we were just waiting. The only thing left to weigh in on was the domestic violence component. As we were just waiting for the network to get their suggested language, but my thought was that we had already approved the other ones. And voted and opted to remove that last bullet.
Okay. So I guess, do we have a motion to approve this domestic violence eligibility criteria?
I will motion that we approve the domestic violence criteria as suggested by the Vermont Network.
I'll second.
Jubilee made the motion, Molly seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
How many is that?
4 in the room.
2 online.
4 in the room
Yeah.
and 2 online?
Yes.
Okay, those opposed? Is that 0?
Yes.
And
Yep.
abstentions?
We have 2.
2 abstentions. Okay, so that passes. Jubilee, I'm going to pass off to you and join another meeting, and then I will be right back.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. There's some other big meetings happening in the state today that a lot of us also generally sit in and are part of. So we'll have some members of the task force coming in and out. So I guess, we've done the household criteria, eligibility criteria. You'll see in this, we've called it a draft report. This is really this is all of the recommendations that have been provided at some point. So
I don't think it has any of the new recommendations. Frank told me last night.
okay, he wasn't able to, I thought he was working on getting them in.
He said,
Or I don't know if it has the ones you submitted yesterday.
it doesn't have the ones that I had sent to everybody but didn't discuss yet, and it doesn't have the new one that I had yesterday. That I was waiting for Chris to email me about.
Okay.
So just so you know that they're
Okay. Well, let's move into the maximum days of eligibility discussion. That starts on page 2, length of stay, days eligible on this document. Let me.
I also don't think it has HHAB's recommendations in there. Because they haven't been discussed.
Okay. Well, would you all, Frank isn't here. Okay. He said he was putting them all in. Okay, let me bring this up. I don't have it open on my screen.
So is someone having one version where we're like tracking changes and again, like all of these I'm just not sure what they are, or like, are we sort of saying unless we talk about it, we may just not include things? I'm just curious. about
This,
the process.
this, my understanding is this document that Frank put together was that, like, he had kind of had that spreadsheet, which was getting hard to read, and when you printed it, there was no way to actually read it because there was so much in this. So this is just, into the subcategories. These are all of the recommendations or things that have been discussed, kind of plugged into the general, charges of the committee.
Or that people have just brainstormed. 'Cause some of this we have never discussed. So
Yes, or recommendations that people have
just sent.
sent
Okay,
in,
got
as well. So, it's a lot of different things.
Okay.
I'm just getting this pulled up.
I did print a copy of all of our recommendations so that if people needed them, because the ones that weren't discussed, I was worried that maybe people didn't have anymore.
Pull it up from here.
I can't read them, so I apologize for errors.
Just a second, folks, I'm joining the meeting.
Can't even figure out how to word them.
Is it the ones that you emailed?
I did, Judy.
Yeah, I have them.
Okay.
Thank you, Brenda.
These are the ones you emailed, Brenda, but they're not, it's not what we're looking at currently.
I think Frank told me that the ones he was including were ones that had already been discussed.
Okay.
At least, I think that's what he did. I asked several times because I was confused.
Yeah, I think I'm a little confused too.
Oh, I might not have given you, did I give you a third piece? Yeah, that's the name. Yep. I definitely can't see and I definitely. Hold on.
I'm gonna use a blown up version of this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate it.
Not what I meant to, sorry, I have far too many windows open. Here we go. Okay. So we have the eligibility criteria, or do you all want to dig through some of these other things around eligibility requirements? We started talking about, one of them was around the task force recommends elimination of the resource test, and savings will not be considered when determining eligibility.
Let me step out for a quick second, just think. It will be long.
My cursor's not. Do we? Okay, we have to pause because we don't have a quorum currently.
Sorry, I'm very sorry. Shelby's having a hard time getting on, so I was just trying to jump out and see what the problem was.
Okay, now we have back to a quorum. So let's go, the one thing we talked a bit about was around resource test, which is where when folks are seeking to enter GA emergency housing is having them, what?
I thought we were doing days of eligibility.
I
know.
think we'll just finish up and go through this section since it
Okay,
falls
sorry,
under
thank you.
eligibility
Okay,
criteria.
so we're back to this.
Yeah, sorry,
Thanks.
I
No
was
problem.
reading the larger, and I think we should just go through, rather than skipping around. Some folks may have a lot in savings or some in savings, and a resource test would require them to spend all of it or some of it before they became eligible. And this can be a huge barrier for when they do find housing to be able to move into that, move into housing and afford all of the things that come along with getting into housing. We have some programs that help pay security deposits and first month's rent, but those coffers always run dry before the year is out. And if someone's received help before, they may not be eligible. And then, you know, when you're moving into a new household, there are additional expenses and deposits that folks sometimes have to pay to get utilities turned on and buy the essentials they need to be able to live. So any conversation around this recommendation that we eliminate the resource test?
I also want to say another place where people have challenges is not just where it would help reduce what's needed for HOP, but also in having to get furniture and beds and all the things that they don't have because they're experiencing homelessness. And we also are draining, like, let's say someone experiences a flood, they might have significant savings, but if we drain those savings, then we've now pretty much created a cycle of poverty in someone that maybe was in low or middle class or income before. And so I think that there's really big challenges and then that is a reliance on benefits that continues. So the long-term negative impact on our state and the individuals is actually pretty significant when we do that.
I'm just curious, in the current requirements, is there like obviously I assume there is a resource test. I'm just curious, is there like a max of like, is it like some, what is it?
There's a $0 resource limit right now, which in actuality ends up being 80 because you have to be able to pay for a night of a hotel room to be ineligible.
Okay.
We do consider some deductions from that. If someone has like an immediate bill they're paying, they have a car repair that they're getting done the next couple of days, we'll take that into account, but
Okay.
the resource test has been 0. The reason for that is that hotels are a finite resource, and so if someone has $1,000 and can't possibly pay for their own hotel stay, we are going to prioritize the person that has no. Right, that was the reason that it currently is a $0 resource. Yes.
It definitely hits providers also. I mean, we get when somebody has to spend down all their money, or we had someone recently who was supposed to spend down their IRA, which means they paid a huge penalty to get it out so that they could be sheltered. And that I don't know why we would want that because it creates a bigger reliance on the state. But it also, then we get calls as providers that ask for funding from us for food, for other things that they otherwise were able to obtain on their own, or sometimes self-pay days because now they've drained savings, so now they're going like they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so I think we have to talk about it like what is best for our long term. Obviously, we want to know the immediate as well, but long term and the good of the overall system, we need to make sure that people have the ability to get out of the situation that they're in. And when you drain the resources, they don't.
I feel like the elimination of the resource test is connected to 4 paragraphs down when we talk about income savings. I feel like they kind of go hand in hand. You know, if we're asking people to drain their resources to stay in the hotel, it would be better that they in turn put that in savings so that we know that they have some money going into their new place to help them afford the daily cost of food and the other things that they're not getting in shelters and other places. I feel like they're connected, and maybe they should be. I know they're two different issues,
Right.
but there's a line there, that's a thread that connects them.
Yeah.
I definitely see the challenge about, if you end up having two people, somebody that has like $1,000 and somebody that doesn't, is this gonna basically take that prioritization out? Like if we get rid of the resource test, then the person that could actually use whatever, $80 to pay for a night could end up getting housed over the person that literally has zero. So I'm a little concerned about that. And I also wonder if there's, and I just don't know if this happens in real life, but you know, because Brenda, you mentioned people that have some savings because, you know, they're out of their house because of a flood situation, so they're homeless and they have, so I think what you were inferring is that they might have a lot of savings because they, you know, this was just a fluke thing. But I'm having trouble, like if somebody had 50 grand in savings and we're not going to look at that, that just seems, so I think there needs to be a reasonableness test here.
So a couple of things, in Section 8 housing, like in a choice voucher, there is no resource test, but it's extremely high. And the reason for that is because otherwise people do not get off their Section 8 vouchers. And because we want people to have those resources. And the other thing is that, let's say you did lose your house in a flood, it was a house you owned, and you have $50,000 in savings. Well, first of all, living in the hotel is expensive, so that's going to get drained more quickly anyways. But second of all, that could be a down payment on a new house, and that gets you out of the hotel much more quickly. And otherwise, that money goes extremely quickly. We've definitely done the math of keeping people sheltered by paying them and by self-paying. And the other piece of this that I think is really important is that the difference between who this impacts and who it isn't is people who have experienced significant privilege in their life. And so they understand different systems and rules. And without going into great detail about that, I think that there is a real barrier when we create, people call economic services in good faith and ask to be sheltered. And then they are like, yeah, I have $1,000 and I'm going to need it for X, Y, and Z, or I have $10,000 and I'm going to need it because my car's dying. What if it's the same thing with $50,000? They might need it for something. And, but there's in good faith informing, and then their choice is drain that money, and we do that to people in poverty a lot, and that's how we end up in cycles where they can't get out of poverty. So I hear what you're saying, but I would say that, first of all, the frequency of that being the choice, between someone with income and someone not, is not as high. And I think we have to be careful about keeping those kind of priorities. I think the good outweighs the bad, and we see that in data across the country about resource tests, and also in the way that HUD operates, understanding that resource tests have to be pretty high for them to not be prohibitive of exiting the need. I think it's in the neighborhood of $200,000. What's the number? The HUD, or it probably depends on what you're getting.
You do what's called like imputing the income when you're doing and so if you have considerable resources and income from assets, that would then put you over the income limit. But that's how that's figured out on the HUD level. So it would depend on your income and assets and what your but that total, what income, overall income level that puts you at. Any thoughts from folks online? I see unknown user and meeting guest. And I know one of you is Shelby, but I'm not sure which.
Hi, this is Shelby. Sorry.
Okay, guest. Okay, just trying to identify. Great. Any thoughts, Chris or Shelby, around this?
I know that, I think our recommendation was no resource test. That, well, mine and Brenda's, and I believe, I think Amy was on that one as well. I might cut out in the next 3 minutes, but sorry.
Yeah, no, I know you're on your way here, physically, so, yeah, okay.
I think the other one is Amy.
Oh, Amy's unknown user, okay. Okay, great, okay, that's good to know.
I guess this is Molly again. I guess I hear what you say, Brenda. It's helpful context. I'm still finding it uncomfortable that we're talking about. I'm uncomfortable with the zero, like resource test, like anything above zero is, but I'm also uncomfortable with not having anything at all. And I just feel like it can be really difficult to, I mean, I guess the nice thing about having zero resources available operationally, it's simpler. And it's, you take out some judgment. But I also, there's just something that makes me uncomfortable going from zero to anything. So that's how I feel right now.
And the legislature did not have a resource test in the law, just so that's a rule that came from the department. And so just to also add
that's
that
helpful
in there.
context.
Yeah.
It's also possible we could do something, where we can't come to agreement around the exact amounts, is that if, something like the task force recommends, if there is a resource test, that the legislature considers. So there's some options. Chris, you have your hand up, please go.
Yeah, nothing earth shattering to say. I'm kind of uncomfortable with any resource test. It seems that the resource test is more appropriate the more restrictive we become. That's opposite world. What I'm saying is the more restrictive we come with respect to eligibility, I think the greater need to have no resource test. So if people meet other criteria, pregnant, DV, with children, etc., my gut's telling me that they're least likely to be able to have resources and may be in a position where that resource test really doesn't fit. And where I'm wrestling in my mind here is the connections between the resource test, eligibility, and especially, which we haven't discussed yet, the contribution, which if we continue with the motel hotel voucher program, I'm really uncomfortable with those funds landing in the pockets of the hotels and motels. And that's where I'm having difficulty, I think, more so with the resource test, is that if individuals have resources, I think the money can be much better spent either to build that individual's assets so they can find permanent housing, and that would be per, some type of savings plan, possibly sponsored within this. But I'm really having difficulty if the resource test results in funds going into the pockets of the hotel owners who share no responsibility with the places they are contracting with the state. I don't know if that's clear as mud, but that's where I'm seeing this divergence in my brain is the resource test and how it ties to funds going to the hotel and motel owners. So I know that was babbling, but I'm still trying to come to grips with my own thoughts on this, but those are the connections. And frankly, I'm leaning towards no resource test at all, because I think there may be other protections in place that would reduce any level of concerns about fraud or things like that. But that's just me being a neophyte.
Thank you, Chris.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Amy Johnson. I'm in the car, so before I jump on the highway, I'm going to chime in. Vermont Care Partners would like to recommend no resource tests. I think Chris did a really good job of articulating why, and I just think that for our network, we really don't need people to be penalized for having resources. I think that any way that we can support people to build towards sustainability is really important, and I think having a resource test will take away from that. So just wanting to let know Vermont Care Partners stance before I mute and get on the highway.
Thank you, Amy.
Yes, I just want to point out one piece that I know Chris had mentioned the eligibility criteria are going to limit who is eligible, but I want to use the example of natural disaster. This summer, Waterbury flooded, and under this category, if we had no resource test, anyone who experienced loss of housing due to a flood, regardless of their income level, because there is no income level in these rules, or their savings, would have been eligible for the emergency housing GA program. And so you could have someone who has $200,000 or $300,000 in savings and was flooded out of Waterbury or Berry, any of the other locations that were experienced that tragedy. So I just wanted to point that out as we're thinking about both income, like if there should be an income threshold to prohibit that, and the intersection with the resource test.
I want to point out that people with the resources to do something else, like really have the resources to do something else, will spend no more than one night, maybe a week in one of those hotels before they say, I am not doing this. And that is just the reality of what is happening. It is not a pleasant experience for people in the hotels. People who really have means are not necessarily going to be going there or shelter. They will figure something else out. Frequently, if they have incredible amounts of resources or means, they will, they also often have family and other resources. So I don't think that situation it wouldn't be that any person who was flooded, they might go there for a week to like figure out where they're going or a few nights, but then they're going to move to whatever their other situation is. The people who can't get out are the ones with no resources. And so we're asking them to drain their resources and then create a situation where we're spending quite a lot of money for the perpetual cycle of poverty. And so I think it's better somebody who has resources, because their trajectory out of the program is going to be much quicker. We're not talking about a high percentage of people in this program anyways.
For Frank and Sarah, who are just joining us back from the Balance of State meeting, we've just been talking about the resource test and elimination of a resource test. It was not something that was in the law from the legislature, but exists currently through rulemaking. And so, yeah, that's been our discussion. I don't know, is there more discussion, or does someone want to bring a motion?
I motion that we eliminate the resource test. Or that we have no resource test, I guess would be the way to make that motion.
Okay.
I'm sorry to come in. Oh, I have a question about the motion language. Sorry to pop in and pop back here, and I know I missed some of the conversation. The resource test we're specifically talking about is savings not being considered when determining eligibility. Is that correct?
It's really it's savings, it's assets. We see people having to spend down their retirement accounts. And so the themes of what we've talked about is how that kind of perpetuates the cycle of poverty. We talked some about how, we just had flooding, a lot of flooding, and how sometimes those folks have a lot of resources. If without a resource test, then they would have been eligible for hotels, was the point the department Nicole made, and Brenda pointed out that generally, folks with lots of resources, they may spend a night or two in the hotels if they were eligible, but it's not a place you're going to opt to stay if you have lots of resources. So they would work to find other housing and other options, or stay with family. So did not see it as an issue.
Okay, I just wanted, thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure we weren't conflating a resource test with income contribution, but it sounds like we're just focused on the resource test as it relates to assets at the time
and being
of
an
eligibility determination. Yep.
Yeah, for folks.
Okay. I will second Brenda's motion.
Okay, great. Do you want to take back over facilitation? Or I can wrap up this part and then hand it back over to you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever works.
Are we doing numbers at a time or just?
Yeah, I can go through Monica, since you're our note taker, is it easier for you if we do one person at a time, or to do like ayes, yeses, nos, and abstentions?
Last meeting, I took notes based on each individual's vote, but just for the previous one, the eligibility criteria, I only captured the 6 yeses, 0 opposed, 2 abstentions. So if you need the details of who's voting what, it would be helpful if you could say your name, and then I will count it. Thank you.
Okay. Let's call the roll. I think that's probably most helpful in this situation. Okay. So I think I have the attendees here. I'll go through them, but if I miss someone, or someone joined or left, just let me know.
Yeah, Sarah, Amy and Shelby have joined since you've been gone. They're
okay, so but
online.
Frank is not here.
Frank is back. Oh yes,
I'm here.
is
I'm here. I
back.
just
Okay.
got camera for a sec. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay. Okay. So I will go through the roll as I have it here. Brenda,
Yes.
Jubilee,
Yes.
Nicole on behalf of Miranda,
Abstain?
Chris,
Yes.
Molly,
Yes.
Lily,
Abstain.
myself, Sarah, I vote yes. Elizabeth,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
and Shelby.
You might be muted, Shelby.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Thanks, Shelby. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yeses and 2 abstentions. So the motion carries. All right. Moving in next to let's see, hang on just one second. I just want to see where we're at here. I think we're moving next into program requirements. And there are, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Should we, just within the kind of eligibility, around income contribution, do we want to talk around that, about that?
That is first under program requirements, the way that I have it broken out in the document.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? We had a habitability standards requirement that we felt like fit in charge 3 and 1, and I don't know if that would go, I couldn't. This is one that has not been, did I give you these yet? No, I didn't do that. But it was one that we have not discussed yet.
So are these things under program eligibility? We're not. So like, should we come back to the field service discretionary funding, the disability or medical condition?
That was like the disability and medical condition one.
And then like the youth access.
That one, that was just like language around, we already we already approved that. Some of this language, some of this stuff is just tracking and notes from our discussion around some of this stuff. So the youth,
Okay.
that we've already approved that under our
Okay.
youth exiting foster care age 19 to 24.
Okay, I wasn't sure if
Yeah.
it was something in addition to that.
Nice. I'm not like
So then, do we want to go back to the field services thing, or that's maybe not related to eligibility, or we're just?
Well, I mean, I think that we're trying to prioritize based on the survey. We can go back to that. Do we want to take a vote on that before we move on?
I'm having a hard time following the report, and so then, okay, so we're not going through line by line. Okay, so then where are we going now?
Lily, are you making a recommendation that we vote on the AHS field services discretion?
No, I'm trying to follow the process, because when you were gone, Sarah, we just went to the next paragraph. So then I wasn't sure if we were just going to work through the document in that way, but then it seems like you're going to a different section. So I just want to try to understand.
Okay, so
where we're going.
Well, the only thing in the first that we hadn't discussed was the AHS field services director's discretion.
Well, because there is income contributions there too.
Right.
That I think just
Okay, goes to the
should have gotten
next.
moved. Yeah.
Okay. So then, yeah, I guess it's up to you. If you see that as part of eligibility, then I do think it makes sense to finish eligibility before going to program requirements.
Okay. Anyone have thoughts on the AHS field services discretion?
I still don't understand exactly what it's saying, and I wonder if this maybe actually doesn't fit in under eligibility. It almost seems like it's just making a recommendation for increased discretionary spending for field services, and then requiring that an eligible expense of that funding. I mean, it is inherently discretionary. That's like, but it almost seems like what the group wants to do is then require an eligible expense for motels. So I guess one, I don't even know if it belongs under eligibility, and then two, like I still am just not clear exactly what's being recommended there. So it'd be helpful clarity.
So Lily, one of the things that I flagged as a concern over the last couple of months is that, as I stated earlier, our field services director reported that they were not able to exercise any discretion in terms of motel stay with the because once somebody had met their 80 days. It may be a moot point as we work through this, you know, later on in terms of length of stay. So we can, I guess I'm just concerned because folks were exited from the motel and they like had oxygen or, like very young kids or, whatever. And our field services director was not able to assist them with any discretion.
And I think that, this is Nicole, I think that is more because of the amount of funds they had, that there is no discretion within ESD or DCF to house for additional nights beyond the 80. I do know that some field service directors were able to place a handful of households for a very short amount of time and negotiate some phenomenal rates so that they could house them a little bit longer. But those funds are so small that they couldn't just carte blanche, like house 10 more families for another 30 nights or whatever. So I do think it's important to keep the two separate. If we start trying to mingle AHS funds with DCF funds for this program, I actually think it could make things more complicated.
Yeah, and Sarah, I think what you were just saying actually makes a lot of sense, because if the intent with that was because there was this sense that the program was not doing what someone wanted the program to do, I think then the recommendation is change the program. I don't think it's helpful to have discretionary funds meet your programmatic priorities. And so if you're saying the reason this was in here was because people had concerns with the 80 days, then I think that should be the discussion, not to build in a discretionary. So I think, yeah, maybe Sarah, to your point, if this just gets taken out and then people make recommendations on what they actually want to see the program be, because I think you don't want discretion, like just discretion and eligibility is like not a good combination.
Okay. That's a fair point. Brenda, I see your hand up and then I see Chris's hand up.
So I just wanted to say that I think that what addresses what you were just talking about, Sarah, is making sure that it's clear. I think the recommendation that we would make is making sure that it's clear in the law that the department does have the ability and to make reasonable accommodations for people in terms of hotel stays who are in situations like that regardless. So there might be somebody who is on oxygen but doesn't yet have a disability variance form and doesn't yet have SSI or SSDI, and the department could make a reasonable accommodation to make sure that they're sheltered. That's not discretion, that's reasonable accommodation. And so I think that that would actually address the issue that you're discussing. And I think it should be, that's a recommendation we were gonna make anyways, is that that no matter what, it be noted that the department does have, because right now there is a 3-page document that I again don't have, maybe someone from Relay can send it to me. The 3-page document that says that they gives a reason why they can't make a reasonable accommodation. And so and then two, the funds that were given to AHS field services coordinators were given to them to do bridge funding if somebody had permanent housing. So if you could find permanent housing for someone, you could, depending on the district, some districts did 5 days, some districts did, if you could get a lower rate, you can do it from now till that date. Some districts did no more than 3 days, no matter what. So it was district specific, but it was only bridge funding to housing. So that was the only times that there was something permanent. So just so that what you're experiencing is real, is what I want to say. And then the other piece is making sure we can make a reasonable accommodation. That's really, really critical here.
I mean, I think, so I guess, Brenda, to that, sorry, I'm getting so much echo from the room. I'm just going to mute you for 1 second. Okay. Whoa, that just got a lot quieter for anybody who was online. I hear what you're saying, Brenda, around the reasonable accommodation, and I support what you're saying around that piece. And maybe it is like a programmatic discussion that we're going to talk about, later today. I just, I'm concerned about, a, parent with, really small children or a, newborn baby isn't going to necessarily meet that reasonable accommodation based on disability. So while I understand the reasonable accommodation piece, I'm not sure that it's expansive enough to vulnerable households that don't, or elderly, or, that don't meet the disability status. So that's what I was flagging. Chris, I see your hand up.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the plain language here, and that's where I'm really trying to focus for my P brain because it's so complex. And this states that the service directors would have, quote, some level of discretion. And to me, that language is way too mealy. Just say some level of discretion. That means either a tiny, tiny, tiny bit or almost a lot, because it says some discretion without defining what the word some means. The second piece is that I'm not sure that I'm supporting any conversations around the bridge underneath this language. It could be certainly should be addressed and discussed later on under other language, but this is specific to individuals who do not meet the categorical eligibility. So if they're kids that are beyond 80 days, they're still eligible for the program. It's just that they've overstayed the max. And that's much different if a field services director were to find the money for that bridge, much different than just, and I'll use the word that you probably may hear some people using, though it's not my language, that a field service director could arbitrarily change the categorical eligibility on their own. That's what this language could present, and I don't think that's what we want to do. Looking at bridge language, yes, but that has nothing to do with actual eligibility of the individuals. And as far as the piece about ADA, I'm pretty comfortable, and I think the language that we have in front of us that has a disability as defined by ADA and documentable, right through variance form, I'm feeling that as far as language is concerned, that should give enough oomph to our recommendations for individuals who do face those ADA issues that need a true reasonable accommodation. So that's where I am on this one. Is I don't think it's that the discussion we're having about field services directors is correct for eligibility criteria. That's just me. And that's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Can I add something?
Go ahead, Shelby.
Okay, so I just wanted to add, like in my experience, actually both pregnancies I lost my job because I was so sick from start to end. And I was homeless throughout both pregnancies because of that. And luckily with the most recent one, I was able to get an exception. But as far as like pregnancy not really relating to like the ADA or disability exceptions or accommodations, I think in some cases it really, really does. And like in my situation, I couldn't get short-term disability or anything just because of pregnancy. So I just wanted to add that because sometimes pregnancy is that bad and you do need a reasonable accommodation for how sick you are throughout it so that you don't, your situation doesn't get even worse.
I think, Shelby, so I hear you on that. I wonder if since the eligibility criteria that we approved includes being pregnant, do you feel like that meets the need? I mean, maybe we don't need to have discretion. I mean, I guess maybe we don't need to have discretion since we've broadened some of the eligibility criteria. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think if the eligibility is open to all terms of pregnancy, then that covers all terms of pregnancy. And then like whether it's a great pregnancy or a rough one like mine. But I also I think, like Chris said, having it say like some level of discretion, I think it's a little, I think that should be defined more. Like, is that supposed to mean that they have kind of a wide range of discretion by situation, or does that mean that there's like an inch of discretion within that rule?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I just, there are human behavior is not always fitting into neat little boxes, but it sounds like folks are
Right.
not wanting to, or not supportive of including that in there, which is fine. So we can go ahead and remove that piece and kind of keep that in mind as we work through some of the other areas of this document. Does that sound okay? The room is still muted. Oh, there you go. The room's muted for anybody who's talking in there.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. Brenda has her hands up. I just wanted to say that the disability, that it meets disability criteria does not necessarily meet the need for reasonable accommodation. I think that there still needs to be, right now, the department is clearly stating that they can't give any reasonable accommodations in terms of people being able to stay in the hotels, and that is what's making people on oxygen end up outside. And we have client is not doing well right now, would probably not survive today. And so, and I think that that being explicit that they can make a reasonable accommodation, because regardless what the legislature decides this session, I think we need to be clear in our recommendations that the department is allowed to make reasonable accommodations.
So I think that language, that's not what this is. And so you need to then, if you can put that in writing and share that with the group.
Well, I'm making a verbal recommendation today about it because that is what I have to do today.
Okay, so you're okay with what Sarah's saying is like, yes, we
agree
that
no,
that's
no,
not it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so is someone taking like master notes? Oh, Monica is. Okay.
Yeah.
So Monica, do you feel like you have the wording that you need from Brenda to make that suggestion?
Monica, I can send you a sentence. I just might be the letters might be mixed up, but I can send it to you.
Yes, I mean, I just want to clarify that I'm taking notes as in like notes for the meeting. I'm not editing the document that is posted that Frank shared.
So is someone editing the document as posted?
Sarah and I review.
Okay, so then Sarah and Jubilee, do you have the wording that you need from Brenda? Sorry, Monica.
Can I give it to you?
Or like a placeholder.
How about after lunch, I will have it for you. Because Shelby will be here and she can help with that part for me. Yeah.
Sarah, you are muted. And I apologize for beeping in the background. It is new member orientation week at the State House, and they appear to be teaching them about roll call votes and how you know when one is happening.
Okay, so moving into the program requirements, which is the next item in the document, there are a couple different recommendations. I can share my screen if that's helpful. Oh, such a bad echo. Can everyone see program requirements?
charge this program pregnancy. Can you charge program pregnancy was? It's under one. Okay. Okay. Participant requirements in the law. Okay. Thank you. All right.
So, sorry, just to be clear, not to be, I didn't mean to be nitpicking. Are we just looking at the bulleted list? And sorry if I missed that. Or are we reading the paragraphs?
Well, there's different recommendations here. So, sorry, there's such a bad echo. The first is a recommendation related to program requirements. In that, it also includes income contribution, and then there is a separate recommendation down here around income contributions also. So I guess I would just open up conversation to I think that we'll probably have more discussion around the income contribution than the rest of these bullet points. So maybe we start with the bullet points minus the income contribution piece right now. So engagement with coordinated entry and or approved housing case management is up here. And then down below, there is also this note around case management also. So let's start with any discussion related to that.
Brenda? I think Amy Shelby and I had the recommendation in here that is about using similar budget language. We made it more clear. Oh, that's what she was talking about with this note. Okay. So thank you. Can't really see it. For that. And we just wanted to make sure that there's some difference after it was pointed out to me what that language said. We adjusted this recommendation just a little bit. Should I, do you guys all see it? Should I read it? Well, that's a joke.
I think the question though is, I mean, as long as people are working on housing goals, or
Right,
is
so-
that,
Yeah. That's what you're
yeah, because that's just sort of a, because there are a lot of folks, for instance, like designated agencies who are not necessarily like housing navigators, but they work on housing goals, and so they're doing housing case management.
But the other budget, the budget says also removing figuring out how to overcome other barriers to housing. And for example, a designated agency that's for mental health, sometimes that is the first step to then getting to that, working on your housing goals. And so people are tasked with that, but we are sometimes like this person needs to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to give an example, which is a client with severe depressive disorder who really the first step is getting this person to come out of their room. And then we can work on housing goals, but we need to work on their mental health challenge first. And that's why sometimes that those things can be tasked separately. And in the language of the law right now, it does say overcoming barriers such as, so that's why we said that. We just wanted to remove, right now ESD tasks these individuals, but they don't necessarily have much knowledge of the individual with the client, with whatever it is, if they're not in coordinated entry. And we were thinking that the care team, using a client-centered approach might be a better way for those tasks to come from, like if we're thinking of it more programmatically. So we have a benefit of, we interact quite a lot with ESD. And so they might know that our clients are working on X, Y, and Z, but not every person that calls in has that situation, but there are case managers and people working with them. So right now it's already working with them, that's fine. But there might, sometimes we don't know why someone isn't doing something, and usually it's some kind of barrier they have to overcome, they're not just doing nothing. Usually there's something that they need.
I have a question, I think, on this paragraph that I think you're referring to, Brenda, that starts with, we recommend using language similar to the budget. The last sentence, I don't understand what this is. A necessary addition of allowed case management. There's something wrong there.
That should say-
Disability.
right.
Go ahead.
That's, right now, not all of the disability, people who work on disability are state funded. And it's, the budget language says state funded housing case managers, but there is, I want to be clear that there is flexibility within the department. The department has allowed some of those folks, but I just wanted to make sure the law was explicit that it allowed it. So there was, that includes people who work on disability, because they're in those disability services, ours, BCIL, others, there is some housing case management that happens, but it's not necessarily fitting in neatly in that category.
Okay.
So it's, I apologize for you guys can clean up my mess right there, but that.
So it's recommending that disability-centered programs be considered allowed as case management.
Yeah, and non-categorical case management, did I say that in there? Yes.
It says it's
Non-traditional / non-categorical, because I call it non-traditional, but I think it's officially called non-categorical.
I have,
Neither right, says Judy.
Neither, it's just this sentence just doesn't make any sense.
That's totally fair. We can fix the sentence.
Okay.
I guess I'm curious, I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second here. The non-categorical case management or disability case management, my first question is, can we have an example of that?
I gave Vermont Center for Independent Living and Homelessness Vermont. We are currently not state funded. And but we do have some housing case management, and we also work on people's barriers in their disability access. We have successfully gotten a huge percentage of, huge is relative in this climate, but we've gotten a percentage of our clients who are very difficult to housed. And what we would want to be able ourselves to continue to do that work, but also Vermont Center for Independent Living often works on barriers in a different way, in a peer supportive way. And they then connect with other services. So the person is directly working with BCIL, but then their peer support is working with the case manager and then with other case managers. So with disability services, it works just a little bit differently, and doesn't tightly fit in the language of the budget right now.
Are you referring to, sorry, this is Lily. What in the budget are you referring to? Are you referring to where it says case management services provided by case managers employed or under contract with AHS? Or is it something else?
I believe it is.
Because, so that section, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding, my understanding of that section, so that I don't know if I can put it in the chat. Is case management services provided by case managers employed or under contract with the Agency of Human Services or reimbursed through an agency-funded grant shall include assisting clients with finding appropriate housing. That is a requirement on those agencies to holistically include housing. It's not exclusionary of who could do the work that ESD could consider. So I just want to make sure I'm seeing the right reference, and maybe that's not what you're referring to.
So maybe what that got turned into though is a rule, because
There is a rule about
Yeah.
housing search, but it has nothing to do with who's on that charge that we just read.
Okay, so right now there's a rule. I don't know exactly where it attaches to it, but there's a rule about coordinated entry or housing case management, and it is, we've been able to work it out, but I would love for it to be explicit that there is, and I think Amy and Shelby were there as well, that non-categorical case management and disability services can be included, or maybe specialty, because there are, in many, mental health workers also sometimes work on housing case management. So there's a lot of different kinds of that, how that works.
I guess I wanted to just follow up on my other question. I'm sorry to jump. I don't know if you were done. Are you done talking, Brenda? I don't want to talk over you.
I don't. Yes, I'm done. Sorry.
Okay. So that was kind of the first piece of my question was like, can you give me an example of who? And you did. I guess my concern is having folks not connected to coordinated entry if they're working with, and homelessness or VCIL. Because I mean, in most cases, especially in Chittenden County, vast majority of folks are being connected to housing resources utilizing coordinated entry. So if there are case management providers that are operating outside of coordinated entry and, supporting households with access to housing, I worry that they're not having access to the same housing resources as others who are enrolled in coordinated entry.
So I guess to clarify, we've said this before, but all but 3 of our clients are entered into coordinated entry. We don't do it. We work with a local coordinated entry partner, but who they're listed under for who they're working with is frequently End Homelessness Vermont. So that's what we're wanting to make sure. But there are those 3 clients that are not in coordinated entry do have a reasonable accommodation to not be in coordinated entry because of barriers that are keeping them from doing that process. So will they be able to get there eventually? Potentially, but it may not happen right away. And when there's a requirement that's just coordinated entry, people are removed from shelter when they can't get through that process. And so some of the clients, it has taken us they are removed from the shelter because we experience that all the time. So some of it may take some of them several months to get through the pieces of the process to get to a coordinated entry partner to do it, based on their mental health or other physical barriers, or maybe they're they're at the moment in the hospital, or they're about to have surgery, variety of things. So I'm just, the point right now, the department is operating and letting End Homelessness Vermont as be a case manager, but we're talking about requirements for the program going forward. And so I want to make sure that it's not just us, because I can put it, because I'm like a spoke in the wheel sometimes, but that it actually is also other service providers that do provide similar, not to us, but provide disability or specialty services of other kinds.
So I think that we get to that piece around later in this document. I'm just looking under.
Sorry. Can I add something real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I know Brenda clarified already, but sorry, I'm getting a wicked bad echo now. So with End Homelessness Vermont, the majority of our clients are in coordinated entry, and a lot of what we do is helping connect and make successful connections with other providers, most of which are coordinated entry agencies. But there's been many times where we have a really hard time connecting with those other providers, and all of our clients have End Homelessness Vermont as their auth rep, which it may not be their only authorized rep, and that's okay. But as their auth rep, I think, and it being like End Homelessness Vermont, a small nonprofit that is not state funded, the biggest thing is having a way to make sure we can successfully connect with other providers. And in some cases, like for example, I had a pregnant client who was in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy, ran out of her 80 days, and was in Chittenden County. And I actually have talked to Sarah about this already, but she could not get an intake done within 10 weeks. So for her, she couldn't even really get into coordinated entry, like in a reasonable amount of time, and then ran out of her 80 days, caused even more problems for her, and then that also delays her getting towards housing, because had she been already enrolled with providers other than just us, she probably could have gotten housing before now. So I think making sure there are provider connections is really, really important. But I just want to be like super, super loud about this, that End Homelessness Vermont, we absolutely do and love to make connections between clients and other providers. We never stop that from happening. But I think any agency kind of needs support in that, and making sure that provider connections are supposed to happen and should happen. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I guess I'm just looking at the bullet point that we're talking about right now, and it says that the program requirement is engagement with coordinated entry and or approved housing case management. And I also want to highlight, Nicole's note in the chat. Like, are we disagreeing? I guess I'm just not clear on like what exactly is happening here.
I'm probably a little lost with every word because I'm on the phone and cutting in and out on my way there, but I just wanted to add that because with what Brenda said.
Thanks, Shelby. I wasn't directing my comment to you in particular. I didn't want you to feel that way. I guess I'm not sure what exactly we're discussing right now with related to program eligibility or program requirements.
Can we read what's in the chat? We're really like with chat and open meeting law and such, it can be used for like sharing documents, but if we're gonna talk about things in the chat, we've gotta read them now, and really should. So do you want me to read that, or do you want to read that, just so everyone?
Yeah, I can read that. I thought since the meeting was being recorded that we would be able to see that, but I'm happy to read that. Okay, so Lily says case management services provided by case managers employed by or under contract with the Agency of Human Services or reimbursed through agency funded grants shall include assisting clients with finding appropriate housing. She indicated a link that's in the chat that we'll put in the minutes and directed us toward page 187 of that document. Nicole posted, this is the language in the current rule related to housing search. Activities shall include at least one of the following: completing the coordinated entry assessment and engaging with a state agency or state contracted service provider to a secure alternative housing placement, addressing barriers to permanent housing, for example, obtaining identification documents, social security cards, or birth certificates for all members of the household, or applying for permanent housing voucher. Chris, Laura said, we are scheduled to take up number 4 after break. The number and types of emergency shelter spaces needed and currently available for each geographical region in the state, with a preference for non-congregate shelter. and then he quotes the agenda, can this be emailed during lunch so we have the opportunity to review before discussion and vote? That would be quite helpful. Okay, so looking at what is in the current rule, and like, are we, I guess I'm just still unclear if, like, if there's disagreement with what Nicole has put in the chat. The room is now muted to get rid of the horrific echo in case anybody's trying to talk in the room.
I'm just planning on sending the reasonable accommodation language over lunch. But the other stuff, I am in agreement that there shouldn't be a discretionary. That in terms of that language in the rule, I just want to make sure that there's reasonable accommodation language in the rules.
So under the program requirements, the first bullet point is engagement with coordinated entry and or approved housing case management, as worded that Nicole put in the chat. Are we in agreement with that bullet point?
I believe there's recommendations around program, those type of requirements in here, right?
I didn't hear
I
what was
think
said.
that Sarah, this is Lily. I think that maybe we went a little bit down a rabbit hole in response to the staffing. I think just what we clarified, or what I tried to clarify, was that there is nothing in the legislation that language around state funded is not exclusionary. It's more about like putting responsibility on those folks. So that I think just to clarify, maybe if there was different interpretation around that. And then I think in some ways this goes back up to if people want to just use that language for reference when then you're just looking at those bullet points around, because right now the rule kind of gives a couple of examples of like at least one, engage with coordinated entry, working with state funded on their housing plan. And that's just because when it's state funded, we just have visibility. So like, we know that like, that is what they're doing, as opposed to trying to like track that down. Or then a third one, which is just like documenting removing housing barriers, which is pretty broad. So I think maybe that's just helpful context of like what's happening currently as people then look at this list of what do people want to propose for moving forward. And is this the list, or what is the list that people want?
I'm wondering if maybe we take our break now and give folks at 12 and do 12 to 12:45, or maybe even one, but give folks a chance to look back at things and get organized, and then come back and pick this up.
Okay, that sounds good to me. All right, so we will reconvene at 12:45 or 1 o'clock, Jubilee. What do you think?
Either one. Say 12:45. Yeah, we'll just 12:45.
12:45. Okay, so everyone who is online on Teams needs to log off and then log back on at 12:45.
Okay,
Jubilee,
we'll see you then.
log off the room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I will as soon as we're done talking. Okay, bye.
Thanks.
Hey Shelby, are you still online?